Welcome to the Entrepreneurial CEO Podcast, where we dive into the real stories behind building and scaling a business. Each episode, we sit down with CEOs, founders, and leaders to uncover hard-won lessons in leadership, systems, and team building. Listen in each week to learn directly from real business leaders who have been in your shoes, had success, made the mistakes, and all of the messiness that comes with building a business. If you're ready to learn from real-world leaders and gain insights you can apply today, you're in the right place. So let's get started. Hey, everybody, welcome back to the show. Ross, thanks so much for being here, man.
Great to be with you.
All right. Everybody, today's guest is Ross Bernstein. He's one of the most in-demand business speakers in the world. He's written 50 different books. He gives this amazing speech called The Champions Code. Ross works with Fortune 500 companies and lots of different companies out there and travels to over 120 conferences per year. He's worked with professional teams and leaders across the industry to help them think differently about performance and culture and what it takes to build a championship organization. I'm super excited to talk to Ross. I'm a sports nut. I love to play hockey. There's some parallels there. So really excited to learn about that. And I think that sports is a great teacher for business and can teach us all how to be, there's so many different characteristics that help us. So love to learn more from Ross today. Thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for having me. This is going to be really fun. And I'm a fan of yours as well. So I'm excited to dive in and learn a little bit more about some of the things you do and share some wisdom with your listeners.
Cool. All right. So I always say this before we hop into all the different questions I have, maybe just, is there anything else that you can share with the audience about yourself or what you do?
You know, I'm from Minnesota. I've, as you mentioned, I've written about 50 sports books. That's always been my passion is sports. My claim to fame, I was a walk-on to play hockey at the University of Minnesota. I lasted about 10 minutes and I wanted to becoming the team mascot, Goldie the Gopher. And I got in so much trouble that inspired my first book called Gopher Hockey by the Hockey Gopher when I was 21 years old. And I just made a career out of it. So now I written all these books. And as a full-time professional speaker, I just travel all over the world, helping people think differently and using examples from the world of sports and all the thousands of interviews of coaches and athletes to help sales leaders, sales professionals and leaders to think differently. And it's just been an amazing ride. I've been able to speak on all 7 continents and really made a lifestyle business. But as an entrepreneur, I do everything myself. I travel with my wife, but I've never had an employee or an assistant. So I run a very different type of business, and it's just a lot grittier and scrappier than most people. So happy to share whatever wisdom I can to help your listeners improve their own lives.
But I imagine there's freedom there, right? Where you're a solopreneur and it's hard, but you don't have some of the complexity or tie downs of having a large team or anything like that, right? There must be some freedoms there to, you don't want to work today, you don't work today. You want to, you just can make your own schedule.
Yeah, I mean, it's always a love-hate relationship, right? I mean, there's always, you're always jealous of the guys who have that secure, steady income, and they're jealous of the freedom that I have. But it's really a quote, life by design, as my friend Jack Daly wrote a book about, where I just really designed a business that works for me. And I love to travel, and we used to bring our daughter with us all over the world. One of the things I'm most proud of is she became Delta Airlines' youngest ever diamond medallion at the age of 13. So we'd just bring her with us all over the world, and she was a public school kid too. So we would just enjoy the ride together. And I think that's the thing, is if you can combine your passion with your purpose and you can help people and travel and live a lifestyle you want to live, then that's what it's all about. And if you're good at it, the money will follow.
I love that. I try to do that. It's hard, especially as you have a business that's growing, but I've started doing like non-negotiables, things that I refuse to miss with kids, because my kids are still in high school and still at home. And, sometimes work gets in the way, but there's certain things I just refuse to miss, my son's games, football games, wrestling matches, stuff like that.
Yeah.
Like, I don't care what's on my schedule. I'm not missing those games. There's only so many of them,
I know. Yeah, they go fast.
They go fast, man. So fast. Yeah. So before we hop in, what position did you play in hockey?
I was a very bad left defenseman.
Okay. Okay. I'm a defenseman. I'm on the right side. I played right D.
Okay,
Well, that's
cool.
that's pretty cool though. You were walk on. That's got to be tough.
I just I could have played small college football, but I wanted to. My whole family was Golden Gophers, and I wanted to go. And I became friends with a bunch of guys in the team, and they encouraged me to try out. And it didn't work out, but I still got to be a part of the team, which was
Yeah.
really cool. And even though I wasn't good enough to play, I was still a part of it, and I got to practice and hang out, and those guys are still lifelong friends, so it's all good.
Well, you also picked Minnesota, man. Where like that's like real hockey, right? It's not
That's
like you
right.
went. It's not like you went down to like Texas or somewhere else where like maybe the
Right.
hockey team's not as competitive. I mean, Minnesota, that's some serious hockey. Yeah. All right. So, you've been working in sports with athletes and those principles. Like when you zoom out and you think about like the core behaviors or systems that separate like the elite, the champions from others, are there any patterns that emerge? Like, what do you see there?
Yeah, definitely. So I've been a working member of the media for the past 25 years. So that gives me access into the clubhouse, the locker room, the press box, the sideline, and I've been able to meet a lot of really interesting people. And that's what I love to do is to study, what makes the great ones great, and then apply that to
Mhm.
business and looking for those trends and metrics and patterns and analytics. And you start to see things over and over again when you talk to people who are in dynasty teams like the Patriots and the Chiefs and uh, the Yankees and Montreal Canadiens. You start to see culture, chemistry, coaching philosophies, buy-in, family, where people talk about like the San Francisco 49ers in the 80s and 90s, from the top down, like from the ownership group down, how they treat people. So it's really it's interesting, and the opposite's true when teams don't win. You see a lot of bickering, a lot of pointing fingers, a lot of jealousy. So when teams win, it's special, it's magic, right? And that's why it doesn't happen very often.
Yeah.
And so I love to learn about it, study it, and then figure out what you can apply to a sales team, to a leadership position, and how you can emulate that to use those same commonalities and characteristics to be better in life. So it's all tied together.
And some companies and some teams are able to sustain that over a long period of time, right? It's really interesting where you talk about the Chiefs. They've been doing it for years. The Patriots did it for, man, the better part of 20 years with Brady and Belichick. And then it slid off a cliff. But for a long time, they sustained that. The Yankees for a long time. The Bulls, right? There's teams that just sustain it year after year. And then eventually it sort of dissipates or erodes. But I'm curious, like, all right, I'm a Patriots fan, so the little homer question, but like you look at them a couple years ago, horrible, right? They were, lucky to win a few games, and this year, all of a sudden, they're crushing it. They didn't
Yeah.
change that much. Like, what do you think happens there? Is it? I mean, does the introduction of Mike Vrabel really mean that much of a difference? Like, does that leadership really turn everything around where now they're now like one or two in the NFL? It's pretty crazy, right?
Yeah, they did a lot of things right. I mean, first of all, culturally, under Belichick and Brady, they built a dynasty that was amazing. 6 titles. They built a culture that was about winning, and Brady was able to convince guys to come there for less money to win a ring, and he was able to create that sort of buy-in. And we showed he did it in Tampa Bay just as
Yeah.
that outlier year as well, just to prove people, look, it wasn't Belichick, it was me. And I think now, cleaning house, and you saw what happened to Belichick. It didn't go well in North
No.
Carolina, but Vrabel's a player's coach. He was in the trenches. He's one of those greedy, just players love him. Similar in Detroit, I think it's going to be those two teams in the finals. In the Super Bowl, very
Mm,
similar coaching styles, very similar cultures, and you get a kid like Drake May who's really smart,
yeah.
buying in. What, 10 in a row? It's
Mm,
incredible how
that is
and it
crazy.
just, and I'm up here in Minnesota suffering. My Vikings are. I'm gonna live my whole life. We're never gonna win one. And I'm looking at the Patriots, just the rich get richer, and there's and part of me is bitter. You look at New England sports, you go, oh man, the Twins. You go, oh, Big Poppy. Well, Twins can't afford him, so he'll go to the go to
Mm.
the Sox. And Kevin Garnett, I did a book with Kevin Garnett a long time ago. It's like, well, I'm not winning one here with the Wolves, but I'll go to the Celtics and win one. So you got a little,
KG
I got
was
a little,
he was awesome. KG
oh,
was great, man. He
I got a
was
little bitterness.
I get
But
it.
what's interesting is, baseball's stupid. There's no salary cap, so you can just buy a team. But football's fair. The Patriots have just as good a chance as New York, as LA, as Green Bay, as it doesn't matter. Like it just comes down to how you want to spend that money and how you want to put a team together. So I'm always fascinated how in the salary cap teams can thrive and why they do better. And then it comes down to those intangibles.
I think it is super interesting. You're right, because there is a lot of parity in some aspects. You look at like, again, being a Patriots fan, in the earlier years, man, I don't even know what year this would have been, but when Brady was still around, the Chargers were really good, and the Chargers they were like competitive against us. We'd be playing against them in the AFC Championship, but that organization could never get over the hump. They always found a way to screw it up, and I have friends who are Chargers fans because they used to live in California, and I feel like as an organization and a team, um, even though they had super talented players and they had great coaches, they just could never push through to the next level and become champions or sustain that. So, and I want to bring it back to business, and there's companies like that too, right? Where maybe you have a great product or you have a great team, but you just can't put that together. In your experience, what is it about the teams like the Chargers or maybe even the Bills, where you've got, man, some of the best players in the league, but you can't push through. You just can't get over that hump.
Yeah.
What do you say
It,
about that?
it's interesting. I mean, there's a million reasons, but Chargers had a problem. They had a ownership that wasn't like the Kraft family. It was just different. Like and it was and success breeds success. When the Patriots won it, all these young guys go, we should. That's the expectation. We should win it. Like why wouldn't we? Like they need a proof of concept. Like can we do
Mm,
this? And Brady was just all about consistency. He was just every day they worked hard and he was able to show them and he put so much of a demand on excellence.
yeah,
Um, and Brady would, stay after practice and it was like a bunch of kids out in the backyard and we were all little kids drawing up plays in the dirt. And that's where the chemistry and the culture comes from when they can create those friendships. And then you don't want to let your teammate down. It's not like it's a business at that point. It's like you don't want to let the teammate. And then, he took less money and he figured I'll make it up on the back end with endorsements, and so he could afford better players. But he kept that pressure on all those guys. And I was always fascinated by Brady. The guy had like 9 coaches he would spend $1 million on. He had like a neurologist to help him better understand the science of peripheral vision and reflexes. He'd have a cryotherapy coach, a sleep coach, dietitians, nutritionists, plyometrics coaches, doctors to help him manage inflammation and supplements and no refined sugar, no refined flour. I mean, the sacrifices he would make and
yeah,
all the things he would do just to get a little bit better. And at the age of 45, playing next to kids who were 21. I
crazy.
mean, these are dog years.
Mhm.
But the fact that he was able to model that behavior, and if they didn't play well, he'd come on the sidelines and he'd bitch at everybody. And no one wanted to let him down.
Yeah,
And that's just very, very rare that you get a leader like that that just puts that level of excellence on and is willing to do the work and put in the time. And Tom had that chip on his shoulder. He was the 199th overall pick of the 6th round, and he never let anyone forget it. Every
mhm,
team that passed on him 6 times, he would say, "I wasn't good enough for you," and he would prove it to him. He'd say, "All right, let's go." Didn't matter how cold it was, how far down they were, and you need those beasts on your team, those leaders, those salespeople, and you need people to buy in and jump on their back and go, "Let's go." And that's what he was all about, man. Let's go.
so that goes into culture because you're right. I mean, I think when you were talking about all those, I sometimes forget all those things that Brady did and who he was. And it's similar to, I think Michael Jordan was like that with his team and he
Yeah.
pushed those guys hard, man. And Kobe seems like he was like that.
Yep.
He just wanted to win. He didn't care and he was willing to do whatever it took to win. And then it makes me think about that's culture, right? Those guys are setting the tone and setting the culture of that organization. And like I tell my kids now, you are who you hang out with, right? And so if you're hanging around with people who like that, who are going to push you, okay, you're going to elevate to be that. On the flip side, if your organization is full of people who are just in it for the money and it's just a diva, okay, well, that's going to bring it down the other way.
Yeah.
So maybe that's part of it. It's just making sure that you have players like that and you're eliminating those other players that can be toxic.
Hi, if you're a CEO out there who's struggling with focus for your company, aligning your team, accountability, if you're struggling with execution, connecting the dots from where you're at to where you want to be, we've got a great program for you here at MAP. My name is Michael Cato. I'm the CEO. Most importantly, I was a client for 15 years, sold my company to a public company, and then bought MAP so that we can help other entrepreneurs with this specific problem. We're a 60-year-old company. We've worked with 170,000 individual executives and CEOs. We've worked with 15,000 organizations. This is what we do. Click the link below to learn a little bit more about how people just like you, CEOs, have transformed their business and ultimately transformed their life by running through the MAP system.
Yeah. Yeah, that's the thing. That's why teams go to training camp in the middle of the summer in some little town, no spouses, no kids. That's where they got to figure out who gets along. And they got to get
Mm,
rid of those bad apples, those team cancers, those divas, those
yeah.
wide receivers, right? The Chad Ochocinco's and
Yeah. Yeah.
the Plexico Burrises, the divas who uh Odell Beckham Jr.'s. They might be great, but they're going to cause you a lot of problems. And I did a book with Randy Moss one time, and of course Randy was one of those guys, but under Brady, he said, "I'm buying in. I'm
Yeah.
gonna play by the rules. I'm gonna show up to practice. I'm gonna play every play." But yeah, to your point about Brady, I've said that before. I mean, other than Michael Jordan, Tom Brady's the most competitive human I've ever met. He hated losing more than he loved winning, and the fear of failure, the fear of disappointing his teammates and letting them down drove him mercilessly. And there was no off season for Tom Brady. There were no days off. And that's the thing, I remember Michael Jordan one time I'd interviewed him and uh, talking about a picture of him crying, hugging the Larry O'Brien trophy after he'd led his Bulls to one of those 6 titles. That I remember asking him, what were you thinking about right there? And he said, how the hell am I possibly going to do this again next year? So he's thinking about that in the locker room after that game, and he's
Mm,
back practicing the next morning because the bullseye on his back would get bigger. Everyone
yeah.
was gunning for you. Even when they came to Minnesota, it was a sellout crowd. Every
Right.
player would bring their A game because they want to play against Mike. You want to be the man, you got to beat the man. So they can never take a day off.
Hmm.
But that pressure, they thrive on that, and they want to win. And I think that's the culture that great companies have is they want to win in customer service. They want to win in hiring, keeping young Gen Z and millennial talent. They want to win in the AI battle. They want to win in all these things today. And how do you measure those metrics? How do you win? What does that mean? So I think it's a lot of similarities.
Mm. The other thing that when you're talking about those guys, um, I think about like that crazy, crazy game with the Patriots and the Falcons, right? Where they were down 28-3. And most people would be like crushed, right? Like, how do you come back from that? But I think those types of elite leaders, not just athletes, but like leaders, my business partner once said to me, like, never get too high, never get too low. You have to be able to maintain composure, right? Even when things are really, really bad or when things are really, really good, you got to maintain composure and like be consistent. You talk about consistency. And I think that's super important. And I think that those guys are able to do that. Whereas other people may get flustered. And you see that with quarterbacks, right? They may get flustered or they just get shaken. But Brady had a way of just maintaining that composure. I see that with Drake May too. He's pretty impressive. But I think from a business standpoint, that's really important too. It can be really, really hard sometimes, and you have to maintain that composure as a leader of people and companies.
Yeah,
Um,
I think the game you're referring to, of course, was the Super Bowl. I think it was 5 or 6. I can't remember which one it was, but I remember it was the largest deficit ever overcome in a Super Bowl. They won it basically the last play. And I remember the Falcons owner, Mr. Blank, I believe, was down on the sideline early celebrating. And Brady used that. That was like bulletin board material. He's like, they don't think we can come back. Brady just kept telling everyone, don't worry, we're going to score this time. We're going to score next time. And he believed. And he got them to buy in, and it was just, and then guys stepped up. They started making incredible catches. Julian was
Mhm.
like playing out of
Oh,
his mind, and it was just,
crazy.
but that was his superpower, was to get other people to elevate their game and to show everyone else, don't let me down. Don't be that guy that loses this game. And when they came back and won, and it really wasn't that big of a deal for Brady, it was just another challenge. But yeah, he never let him get too down, never get too high. He just said, let's go. And I think great companies are able to, they're going to go through ups and downs. We're all going to go through adversity. We're all going to get kicked in the side of the head every once in a while and have to deal with stuff we don't want to deal with. But that's what makes the top producers and the elite performers elite, is they're willing to get through that stuff where other people just simply aren't. And it sounds cliche, but you see it over and over again. And I think culturally, it's true. Like I work with a lot of different types of companies, sales groups. I was with a group earlier this year, a big medical device client, and I remember I was speaking. They probably had 1,000 sales professionals in my audience, and I realized afterward, or right before I got on stage, that 95% of the audience were either former Division I or professional athletes. And that was by
Wow.
design, because the ownership group were athletes and they wanted to surround themselves. And it wasn't just like football and baseball players. It was women's volleyball players, golfers, swimmers, hockey players. These are peak performers. They're great listeners. They're competitive. They know how to play in a team. They can take criticism, constructive criticism. They can yell at them and they're not going to crumble. So they gamify everything. There's a
Yeah.
challenge so they want to win. They want bragging rights. So they surround themselves with those people, and that's why they're successful. If you don't perform, you're out. And not all companies can do that, but some can in certain industries, and that's why they're able to continually outperform their competitors.
We always loved hiring former athletes. There's so many things. All those things you mentioned, also like delayed gratification. They
Right?
understand the value of showing up for practice every single day and
Yeah.
like, the cookies down the road 6 months, right? Like they don't need it
Yeah.
just today. And so there's so many things about sports, that so many great lessons that come from sports and competitive sports. Uh, Ross, when you've worked with these companies, or we talk about accountability a lot. When you look at some of these high performing cultures or teams or organizations, you know, how do they go about accountability with, their people or their athletes? How do they hold each other accountable to ensure that they're marching towards that goal? What kind of systems have you seen that work really, really well?
Yeah, it's fascinating. I talk a lot about accountability. That's one of the hallmarks of my program, and it stemmed from this series of books I wrote called The Code. It's about the honor code in sports, about the unwritten, unspoken rules, about the fine line between cheating and gamesmanship in sports, and what happens if you cross that line, whether that's sign stealing in baseball or taking steroids or the flop in basketball or the dive in hockey, and how the game polices itself. Um, it was a really, the cover of the baseball code was the infamous picture of Nolan Ryan giving Robin Ventura the business. If you remember that, he plunked him and he charged the mound, and he punched him in the face a bunch of times. And there's a backstory. He'd pimped a home run, he'd stolen some signs, and then there's retribution, and then there was holding him accountable. And I
Mm,
wrote a book. The Hockey Code got turned into a movie with an Academy Award-winning director, and it's about fighting in hockey. And I interviewed a lot of guys, everyone from 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 Zdeno Chara to Phil Esposito to all the enforcers. And people ask me a lot about what I literally wrote the book on why there's fighting in hockey, and it's about accountability. If you cheat, if you take shortcuts, if you take liberties with a smaller player, the honor code says you must be held accountable. When
mm,
you become a professional hockey player, your face mask comes off because you can't hide behind that. There are players, enforcers, um, um, whose job it is to make sure that you understand that the players live by this code. If you do those disrespectful things, you must be held accountable. You will be challenged to a fight and you lose some teeth. As you know, we call that spit and chiclets in our business,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
But if you do something dirty, if you run around, your own teammates won't even open the door to let you back in the bench. They say no because the wheels of retaliation will be set into motion, and that enforcer will come beat the hell out of all of you. And that's what happens. In fact, Chris Nyland, former Boston boy, was the star of that movie. One of the most notorious fighters of all time. Chris was not a heavyweight; he was a middleweight, but he'd fight anybody. He was fearless, and his teammates loved him because he was willing to do whatever it took to stick up for his teammates and fight other people's battles. But his job was to make sure that your star players had space. If anyone was going to mess with them, he was going to make sure that they understood you don't do that. You don't touch our players, and I'm willing to make sure that we hold you accountable. So in
Yeah.
hockey, if you cheat, if you don't play by the rules, you must be held accountable. In business, it's not always the same thing. We see it with Enron, with Fannie, with Freddie, with Goldman Sachs, with Bernie Madoff, with Lance Armstrong. There's cases, but overall, it's hard. Great companies have cultures where if you don't do the right thing, they allow you to have whistleblowers. They allow you to say, hey, if there's a safety issue here, we need to get this right. Let's shut down the plant. Let's do it right. Not every company does that. They follow the bottom line versus the moral line. So I encourage companies to follow that line. And that's a big part of my program. My program is called the Champions Code, Building Relationships Through Life Lessons of Accountability and Integrity from the sports world to the business world. And it's about creating a culture where we want to do those right things, where that just becomes second nature. But it's hard. People want to win. They want to make money. They don't want to they want to take shortcuts.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
how do you get to where you create a culture where people don't want to do those things? So it's always a battle.
And when you're talking about accountability, do you also talk about it through the lens of, holding people accountable to the performance, the goals that they set for themselves that contribute to the company's performance, and then how do managers manage that? Is that also part of it?
Yeah, I mean, I think great managers will ask the right questions, determine the right goals, and set those goals together, aspirational goals, and they'll raise those goals accordingly. If they don't achieve those goals, they want to know why. And they're going to
Mhm.
ask the right questions, and then they're going to ultimately hold them accountable. I mean, you might get a free pass if you do other things. See, that's the thing. Like in sports, there's roles and role players. You got guys, like clubhouse guys in baseball where their contract's not measured in home runs and RBI.
Mm.
Um, Big Poppy at the end, um, his numbers weren't great, but he was a clubhouse guy. The young guys looked up to him. If they could
Yeah.
see how he practiced, how he took care of his body, how he got to sleep, how he didn't, do dumb things, model the right behavior. You have to have those guys. And the leaders need those guys. They can't, 162 game season, they can't be in the back of the team bus, the back of the locker room. They don't know what's going on. They're out spinning all the plates, doing all the dirty work out in the front. So you need those eyes and ears, those moles, those spies to tell you what's going on. And collectively, you can hold guys accountable. If a
Mhm.
guy isn't pulling his weight, if they're dead weight, then you light a fire under their ass, right? Maybe you demote them, you put them on the bench, maybe you send them to the minor leagues. That's no guy wants to be on the bench, especially hockey. Nobody wants to be a healthy scratch, right? That's
Mm.
the worst because that means you're good enough to go, but you're not going to go. Um, so you trade a guy. You get the right people in the right seats in the right bus. Cliches, but these are all true. You got to because in sports we have a shared vision. They all got to win. Because if you
Yeah.
don't win, these owners they'll fire everybody, including the coach and the GM. So you gotta all win together. And if people aren't pulling the weight, they get rid of them fast.
Yeah, I mean, with sports, it's so clear what the goal is, right? Every year it's the same to win the championship. Business, the goals might be a little bit different, but I think there's still the same parallel. It's still the same, that you need to be pulling your weight, you need to be contributing, or maybe you're not the right person for the seat on the bus, and then we need to move you. And so I think that's super important.
Yeah.
For the folks that um, are listening, we have a lot of CEOs, business owners, business leaders that listen to the podcast and they're part of the MAP community. what would you, what are there any things that stand out from your experience? You've been doing this a long time, and speaking at these conferences and working with different companies and looking at athletes and leaders, you know, are there any things that stand out about how people can improve, any things that they can do to improve their organization or themselves as leader to separate themselves and, move into that high performance bucket, right? Into the area of
Yeah,
those elite organizations.
yeah. I think there's a lot of things. I mean, being an entrepreneur is, whether you're within a big company or not, it's about, you start to see commonalities, those top producers. I'm at a lot of those president circle conferences where they get to reward the top sellers, and they work out in the morning. They 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 eat well. They take care of their body. They study. They're listening to podcasts like this. They're reading books. They're like me. I'm a member of Entrepreneurs Organization. They want to be in peer to peer masterminding groups to be better. They give and serve their communities. They're involved with philanthropy and charity.
Mm,
They're family people. They want to, like you, prioritize time to spend with their kids and their spouses, and they productive, healthy marriages and relationships and friendships. And they maximize their time. So they get up early and they do the dirty work. They work out. They make those calls. They use social media productively, not scrolling and doing stupid things. And they understand that reputation isn't what you say about you, so everybody else says about you. So they use LinkedIn efficiently. They um, they customize things. They customize pitches. They customize presentations. They don't just do canned things. They make it special. They take care of their clients. To be the trusted advisor, you get in your car and you go meet with them and you solve their problems. You don't monetize everything. You believe in the laws of karma. That's what I do. I don't just
mm,
I want to help my clients be better. I recommend referrals constantly to my colleagues and friends. I'm helping them get business, helping them win. If they're down, if they're not feeling well, I call them, I help them. It's a lot of little things that collectively grow into big things. So there's no one right way, but I do see a lot of these things that come over and over again to the top producers that are successful in life and in business and in family.
okay. There's a lot there. I mean, I think just being intentional with all aspects. That it all stitches together, right? Yeah, you're right. It's never one thing. It's never one thing. Well, Ross, thank you so much for being here. I really
Yeah,
appreciate it. Where can folks go to learn more about you, and what you do, or possibly connect with you?
sure. I'm on LinkedIn and I excuse me, have a website, rossbernstein.com.
Okay, awesome. Well, thank you so much again for being here. Really appreciate your time. Thank you everybody for listening, and we will see you next time.